Testing. Check. Checkity check. Check. What was that? What was that guitar? Was it just a little?
I think that was him connecting to his Bluetooth.
Oh. All right. Well, this should make for some interesting.
This will be one of our more interesting episodes in terms of just quality and scenario.
From
over there talking to us now, and while we're recording.
We'll be out of your hair in like 5 minutes. Or not 5 minutes, but not too long. Oh.
Are we going to...
Well, I'll raise you and out of your hair in 50 minutes.
They're only getting half the conversation. That's assuming
okay.
We're leaving it in.
Yes.
Yes, we're recording.
This is it's called a cold open.
And boy, this one's cold.
Yeah, and open. And open.
We would like to record, so if you could not bass boost Billie Eilish over there for a bit, that would be nice. Thank you.
But
I
do.
What about your butt?
Well, I'm more concerned about his. With all that, we won't elaborate.
We won't. It'll just be in your imagination if you weren't here.
Yes.
You had to be there, but also kind of glad you aren't, because then that would mean we'd have more spectators in the studio.
Yeah, which I suppose you could say this is a proper studio because you can close this in. We're in a new spot now.
Yeah, you could close it if most of your stuff wasn't blocking off the other door. Not like it would soundproof this place.
Yeah, we're in a new house.
Anyway.
I've started moving
my a relative term.
Yeah, I started moving most of my stuff over here, but it's all piled up in the living room waiting to be redistributed.
Yeah, we are moving house because we're getting kicked out of the other one for, well...
I mean, it was part of the plan the whole time.
Yeah, we agreed to get kicked out at this time.
Yep. Our contract of sorts was up, so...
And so now we... Oh,
you found the bass booster.
We found...
Bass booster?
Yeah, no, booster?
Booster!
We're doing our NPR radio voice.
No, I quit doing that because Riley thought it was annoying. It's also a little different this week. Well, for one thing, it's Memorial Day week,
which is kind of why we're kind of haphazard here.
A little haphazard. It's just Nathan and I today. Riley's gone, and John is apparently also gone. So we're just kind of going for it as a duo.
In half the living room occupied by our future roommates.
Yep.
Or
current roommate.
Kind of current, kind of future. We're in that transitory period where it's hard to tell.
Yep. So we are in between, as it were.
Speaking of transitions, no, not yet.
No.
But it's like,
not quite there.
Not quite there. I know. I just, speaking of transitions, was the perfect transition. Because
but now it's not anymore because we didn't transition into anything.
Now we transitioned into a discussion about transitions, though.
Yeah.
So it still works.
Fair enough.
It's also June, but so it takes a slightly different meaning, but we're not going to go into that.
Yeah. Oh gosh. It's kind of interesting how we moved away from the Newman Center and then we moved back to across the street.
Where did that bring you? Right?
Full
back to me.
Yeah, full squirrel. Brought us full squirrel.
The radius of a squirrel?
Yep.
Have you talked about the radius of a squirrel on the podcast?
Maybe. My mom, when she would teach us our math lessons, when she'd try to say circumference of a circle, it'd always come out circumference of a squirrel, because usually this was like early afternoon after we'd eaten lunch, and everybody felt kind of sleepy, and we made the mistake of doing math lessons on the couch in the living room. So instead of at our desk. So that led to some rather half-awake lessons, but I promise I got a good education. But yes, the circumference of a squirrel is what often came out.
But like, where would you measure it from? From the squirrel's center of gravity, or from?
I think if a squirrel was like curled up in sort of a roll.
Or is it like the bushier tailed ones that'll have the end of the tail a little bit curled? You just
Which
measure
way is
the
the
end of
cross
curl.
section here? That's kind of an
That is
interesting
the question. I mean, just chop its head off and it's a circumference of the neck.
I guess.
Or there are multiple circumferences you can measure on most living organisms.
Since they're generally 3-dimensional.
Yes, there's like multiple ways you can cut them and get cross sections and get circles and in such a way.
And then you can cook them.
How many 2-dimensional circles can be projected on the human body, I wonder? A vast number, I would
Vast
imagine.
number, yeah.
Particularly if you
polygons
consider
we are.
the inner organs and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
We have a nearly infinite number of polygons, if you will, just
Or
because
quite
nothing is a...
unwieldly large number.
Most of it's air, too. It's weird.
Yeah.
Because it's like there's, like, in... Atoms have, like, you know, their
There's
mass,
empty
but
space
spread out.
between, yeah.
We're mostly water, but most of that water is empty space, and most of that empty space is...
We're
Physics-
still figuring that out.
Yeah.
There's a lot of subatomic particles and stuff. We don't really know exactly what they are or what they do.
And that's not my field of science. So
No, but it's interesting to think
cool
about.
stuff to like ruminate on. It's like, whoa.
Whoa. But yeah, I think movies like Ant-Man or other things, I mean, understandably, but tend to really, really dumb this subatomic stuff down.
I mean, you got to kind of dumb it down in order to make it digestible for your average, like, audience goer.
Yeah, but I mean, like, stuff you don't
also-
understand is basically magic, right? And that's sort of what it ends up being.
Right. The weird thing is, though, in the movie specifically, like, Ant-Man's power is described as he, like, condenses the space between atoms.
Oh, yeah.
Which means he has the same mass at all times.
But density
But he
is-
should also... His density changes. And also he should never be able to go subatomic because that's not how it goes. There's only so much... You cram the atoms together. He basically makes a black hole at that point.
Yep.
It would have been a little more believable... Well, air quotes, sci-fi believable, that if they stuck with the comic book explanation, where there's this parallel dimension that he is pulling extra matter from and releasing extra matter into when he changes size.
Which, it's
'Cause
hard
he'd
to
be
say
like-
which is the lazier explanation.
Well, here's the thing. If you have the same space, same mass, but increase the space to be Giant Man, you're not going to be smashing any planes or fighting Iron Man or anything. You're just going to be blown around in the wind because you're just a giant sail at that point.
Yeah, you probably break your bones fairly easily.
Well, that's probably.
Yeah, you're not going to be
But yeah.
punching a truck or anything.
They just wanted some science fiction explanation to say big men get tiny.
And honestly, I'm not really the kind of person who, at least for this sort of thing, it's science fiction, and that you just sort of accept it and move on.
But also, I think
As long as it follows the rules that it sets up.
right. And there's obviously going to be one spot where science fiction breaks a rule. Is it pausing again?
No,
okay.
we're good.
No, we're good? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This is... Anyway,
It's being troublesome today.
because science fiction is fiction, there's going to be a spot where it breaks the rules at least at one point. But if it's consistent about where it breaks the rules and the consequences of breaking that rule, then it's something you can suspend your disbelief for that one point. Just put a little pin in it, and then let the rest happen. Mm-hmm. Which is, I like science fiction. Science fiction's cool.
It's more about exploring
Like what
interesting
ifs.
concepts, yeah.
And then sometimes those what ifs actually are things that happen later. Mm-hmm. I imagine when they were writing Flash Gordon and Dick Tracy, they would have never thought that we'd have actual watches that relay video and audio to another person's watch.
Yep. And it's sort of one of those self-fulfilling prophecy kind of situations, I feel like, for some things like that.
Where it's like, you know what, this would be cool. Let's imagine it and show off how cool we think it would be. And then people are like, yeah,
People grow up watching those movies, and they're like, you know what?
let's do that now that we have the technology. And then they develop technology to do that because...
And it happens to be very practical in some cases and very impractical in others. Like, say, your smartwatch versus smart glasses. Like, there's the whole Google Glass thing like maybe 10, 12 years ago that they tried to get going, and then it was just like people couldn't see.
Yeah.
The HUD can only be so far away from your face and be practical.
They still have the Iron Man HUD in like the movies though, so it's still a cool idea people have. Or like the Edith glasses from Far From Home, Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So it's still a thing people think would be cool. And so later, maybe when the technology actually gets practical.
Well, I mean, like if a HUD's projected onto something a little further away from your eyes, it's more practical. Like, a fighter pilot helmet, for example, would have a HUD projected onto the visor. And I think that's kind of what they're going for with Iron Man. It's just like the way they shoot it. It's it looks like it's a lot closer to his face.
Well, because it's a close-up to Robert Downey Jr.
Yep.
And they want to show off that face, and so they don't want to obscure it too much with things.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, kind of hard to obscure things in a desert. We're talking about, we're the Palladium Papists. I'm James.
I'm Nathan, and today we don't have a third person.
Nope.
And we're also getting philosophical about the movie Mad Max Fury Road.
So, yes. Tell us about Mad Max Fury Road, Nathan.
Mad Max Fury Road came out in 2015. It's like, I believe, the fourth movie in the Mad Max series, or
something
fifth. But it's also kind of a reboot because it really doesn't reference anything, and it doesn't have.
I think
the originals had
Mel Gibson.
This has
Tom Hardy
as Max.
Yeah. I think it's supposed to be the same continuity, if I'm not
kind
mistaken.
Of. There's some theory that this Max might be a character from one of the previous Mad Max movies that was a kid at the time.
Oh,
who grew up to be the new Mad Max. But really, that doesn't have much bearing on it. There is some,
because you never even hear his name.
He just calls himself Max.
Mm-hmm.
And there is some backstory that's alluded to. In fact, the movie kind of starts where he is just kind of shambling through the wasteland post-apocalyptic desert, because that's the setting of Mad Max. It's this like nuclear fallout world that's been decimated, so now he's all in the desert that used to be North America, we can assume.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like being haunted by visions of this little girl who's like, "Why didn't you save me? You suck."
Mm-hmm.
And he's a little bit bothered by that. So the movie opens, he's in the desert, his car breaks down, and he just kind of passes out. He then wakes up because he has been captured by the War Boys, which is a group led by a character named Immortan Joe.
Mm-hmm.
Joe's like this tribal leader with a great big mask, and he's all freaky and scary looking because
really pale.
Mad Max character designs.
Yep, pale.
And he leads this like society of like very warlike, very tribal people, and because they live in the desert, water is very scarce, and so you control the water, you control the people.
Yep.
So he will miraculously, air quotes, release water to the people every week or so that they survive and depend on him.
And things are almost like an ant colony in that each type of person serves a specific role.
Right. There's like the War Boys, who are the fighters who ride on the giant like trucks, because that's the other thing. They have these big war trucks that are all spiky and all flamey and stuff.
Mm-hmm. And then you just have women are basically they're basically tools, and almost
all the
like
people
livestock.
are basically tools and livestock to him. He's got like a room full of like 5 or 6 wives. He's got like people whose job it is to have kids. He's got people whose job it is to fight and die. There's people whose job it is to just be helpless on the bottom, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's kind of where we are. This little place in the desert that's run by this cruel tyrant.
Mm-hmm.
And his guys, just at the time of Max's return, they just got back from fighting somebody in their trucks and stuff, and they're all being celebrated as heroes. There's one guy named Nux who is kind of who's I believe sick with
He's
probably radiation poisoning.
He's got cancer.
Yeah. Oh, he's got cancer. That's
He's got a
what it
couple
was.
big tumors.
Because of radiation poisoning and stuff, because post-apocalyptic nuclear fallout stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to keep him alive, they need to transfuse fresh blood into him, right? And so who do they have with fresh blood? They have Max.
Mm-hmm.
So they tie Max up onto a pole and run a tube from his arm into Nux's arm.
And call him Blood Bag.
Yeah, he just refers to him as Blood Bag for half the movie. It's funny.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of Max's scenario right now. Meanwhile, outside, there's Immortan Joe is sending one of his best drivers out, Furiosa. She's like got a robot arm and she's cool and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like one of his best drivers. And she's going to go out to get ammunition and gasoline and just the supplies. So they're sending her off with a great big send-off, and it's this whole thing. She's escorted by a group of war boys, and so she goes off to do that. But turns out she's not actually planning to do that because she has other plans.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was kidnapped from another tribe, like as a child, and then brought up in Joe's society. Mm-hmm. So she kind of resented him her whole life.
Yeah.
Okay, we're good. So she's got this great big plan to bust out, and she's taken with her several of Joe's wives. Mm-hmm. So this gets him very, very mad, as one would expect. So while she's trying to lose his boys in the desert, Joe rounds up his war posse, and that drags Max along with because Nux is one of the fighter
warriors,
guys. Yeah. So there's this. So that leads to a great big car chase scene where they're all driving through the desert, is trying to lose them, and
don't they drive into a sandstorm, or is that a different point?
That is like at the end of this sequence.
Yeah,
but at some point, I believe Mac. There's like two waves where she's trying to get away from her immediate posse, her squad, and she manages that. And then that's when Max catches up, because I think Nux was in the initial accompanying party with her. It's been a bit since I've seen it.
Yeah.
But so Max and her kind of team up tentatively, just because it's like Max wants to.
He manages to escape. And
he manages to escape.
When they go into the sandstorm.
Yeah. So large set piece action moment, because that's a lot of this movie. Not a whole lot of story happens. It's just a lot of. I mean,
there is storytelling in the
absolutely
action, but we'll
and
get
it's very
to that.
subtle.
We'll get to that.
So yeah, they drive through a sandstorm to lose most of the guys, but in the struggle, Max ends up on the rig that Furiosa is driving, and so he's kind of angry and doing his own thing and trying to figure out what's going on. So he tries to steal the car, but then they catch up with him. So they all kind of make a deal to, you know what, we're all trying to escape this. Let's not kill each other, maybe.
Yeah, let's team up for now. And I think that's when it's revealed to Max that she's helping these wives, harem escape.
And one of them, like Joe's favorite, is pregnant currently. So there's also that.
Yep.
Yeah. I was gonna say something
about teaming up.
About the teaming up. What was I gonna say? Anyway.
They team up.
This is real professional.
Yep.
Anyway, they give them some water, they team up, and this is like, oh wait, that's what it is. This is the first time Max actually talks in the movie.
Yep.
The rest is very, very grunty, very not many words, but now he actually has to communicate with people, so he starts talking, which is kind of neat. He's been a silent protagonist up to this point.
Yep.
And for the rest of the movie, he's a mostly silent protagonist because his actions kind of speak louder than his words.
Yep.
So anyway, after the sandstorm clears up and they're in the car, Furiosa had made a deal with another rival gang to help protect them as they pass through this canyon. And they're all on motorcycles and stuff. But then for whatever reason, I believe they realized that the leader of the biker gang realizes that, oh, this isn't just a supply run. You're escaping by yourself. This is you're escaping with some of Joe's best women. So I don't want to get on Joe's bad side like that.
Yeah.
So they kind of turn on her, and there's an even bigger chase scene where the bikers and Joe's gang team up, and they go through the canyon, and it's this whole thing. And I think it's during this chase scene where Nux gets stuck on the rig.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right.
Right. And also it's when it's during this chase scene where the pregnant wife falls off and gets run over and dies, which makes Joe very sad and very angry because he turns out he had a son. When during the autopsy they find out. So yeah, Nux has stowed away on the war rig they're riding, and kind of pops out to threaten them and try and earn his glory, because the whole thing is it's like they're
all trying to please their master, right?
Right. It's like, I'll see you in Valhalla, brother. And he sprays himself with spray paint and goes and tries to kamikaze himself. But so yeah, he's basically threatening to kill, but they restrain him and tie him in the back and stuff. But I forget exactly when it is, but he
comes around.
He kind of comes around because like there's one of the wives that he kind of starts
to connect with, and he realizes, oh, maybe these are people, and maybe I should start thinking for myself instead of believing everything they tell me. So Furiosa this whole time has been driving with a direction in mind, because she has heard of this green place, like one of the last few green places out there. So if they keep, and I think this is where she was originally, where she was
from originally.
Yeah.
So after they escape the canyon, it's like nightfall, and they drive and they drive and they're driving and driving, and
they go through like this. They go through the swamp area.
And it's during this point where there's a bit of a lull in the action, where we get to have Max and the people talk and kind of figure out what's going on and kind of get more comfortable with each other, while also having high tensions because, well, somebody's got a gun and stuff. So the next morning, after driving through the night, they meet, like, there's this scout lady who's kind of keeping watch for her group.
And a bunch of bikers come around them, and then it's basically this tribe of women who are the only people left from this green place.
Yeah. And these biker ladies are who Furiosa was originally from. And they were like, so, we drove all this way. Where's the green place? And they're like, you know that swamp you just drove through? Yeah, that was it. That's what's left. And they're like, oh, crap. So we drove all this way for kind of nothing. Yeah, you kind of did. Well, that sucks. So they kind of get disappointed for a bit. But then Max has kind of a crazy idea, but he's Mad Max, so what do you expect?
Yeah.
And he's like, you know what? Every war boy is on those rigs trying to chase us and hunt us down. They're after us.
The home base with all the water is unguarded.
Yeah, the home base with all the water is unguarded. And Joe has a lot of water and a lot of greenery to power his lavish lifestyle, and he only gives out just enough to the people to make them follow him blindly, right? And so Max has this idea. It's like, what if we just drove back and past them and took over? And we lose them in the canyon. We kind of block that off with like the bombs and munitions that you have on board. So we just blow up part of the canyon, and they can't get out. What if we did that? And Furious is like, you know what? You're crazy. Let's do it.
Yep.
And so that's the final act of the film. They're driving back. There's a great big chase sequence where they
Nux sacrifices himself to block the canyon and set out the explosive.
And after they blow up the canyon during the battle, Furiosa got very damaged, very, very bad, injured, so injured that she needed a blood transfusion. And so Max, having a needle handy and not worrying about diseases of whatever kind, because those don't, He donates his blood to her so that she can survive. And then they make it back. I believe. I'll check the wiki, but I believe like there's one final standoff with Joe who just makes it back.
Yep.
But after Max they drive the truck into the water tower and release the water to all the people, so it's like you don't have control over here.
And then in the chaos of just people being liberated and rejoicing, he just sort of slips away.
Yeah, Max just kind of walks away because we've had several more flashbacks with the little girl he failed to save, but he has at this point kind of overcome those demons and redeemed himself in his own eyes by doing this act and saving these people. So that's kind of the plot. That's the short of it. There's not a whole lot that happens in the movie, but it's how it happens and
the meaning
behind it.
Yeah.
Because essentially it's just there and back again, a Mad Max tale.
Yeah. Minus dragons, but
it's mostly how it's executed that I like. Because this movie is kind of fun to watch.
Yeah.
It's like got all these chase sequences that are practical effects and all actual stunt drivers jumping back and forth between cars on swinging pike poles
over the top flames coming out of trucks.
There's just one truck that has flames shooting out the back and a guy playing electric guitar nonstop who's like tied to the car. So it's this whole thing, the weird over the top zany world.
The colors
of Mad Max.
like really saturated, like really heavy orange.
Oh yeah,
for like the flames, and then the desert, and then blue
like
for the sky.
Like, vibrant orange brown during like the sandstorm. The night is like blue. Is like so. There's a lot of really stark and interesting and cool color choices, and all the characters. Like Max is pretty normal looking, but then you go into all of Joe's war boys, and they're all
like
painted crazy colors.
They're all bald and painted white,
and they got these crazy outfits. Or like
with like
the leader of the biker gang, who has like a metal nose stapled to his nose because it fell off at some point because it's the post-apocalypse.
Yep.
There's like guys with great big tumors that are painted. Like isn't there one that has a tumor that has a smiley face? It's like
that's Nux.
That's Nux. He named his tumors.
Yep.
So yeah, the point is that there's just really visually kind of crazy. But it's like it's weird and grisly, but it's cartoonishly grisly, and it's never like grisly without a point, because like the whole point is to illustrate how just thug-like Joe's crew is, and how they treat each other, and how they treat their underlings.
And sort of his character design too. Like he has this big mask, and then he's kind of fat while everybody else is kind of thin and starved looking.
And he's got like this crazy stringy white hair, and like everybody's got tattoos. There's like some recurring thug characters that I don't really remember the names of.
Yeah,
but they're like
not really the point.
That's not really the point. They just have to have a striking design so they're fun to watch fall off the car. And then, so yeah, that's kind of like, that's one of the cool things. It's like, it's a spectacle.
Yeah.
It is visually fun to watch unfold.
A lot of the storytelling is done via the action.
And also there's a lot of like atmospheric design world building where it's like everything is built from spare parts.
Yeah.
All the cars look like they're 3 cars mashed together.
Character is the driving force of this movie.
Yeah. There's a lot of distinct visual character and
character to the setting and different things like that. So.
And also the characters are a driving force of this film.
Yeah.
Because I think there's like not a whole lot of characters, but the characters that are there really are kind of interesting. One of the things I like about the character arcs is at the beginning, everybody, all the main characters are kind of doing things for other people. They're like being subjugated. They're being like,
and they're driven to break away from that for selfish reasons.
Right.
Like
because
Max,
Furiosa has been driving her whole life for Joe and doing Joe's bidding. Max has been being used as a blood bag by Nux. Nux tried to throw his life away a couple of times for the sake of his cause and his brothers and being a good warrior. And then like there's one of Joe's wives that got a connection with Nux, right? They were all being used as women in their situation. So, but by the end of the movie, all of them were doing the same things they were doing, like they were forced to be doing, but it was their choice at that point because Furiosa chose to drive the car for her people.
Yep.
Nux chose to sacrifice himself for something that actually was worth it. Nux's girlfriend chose to show affection for someone that she actually cared about. Max offered his own blood for someone he cared about instead of having it be taken from them. So having all the characters at the start reflect where they were at the end.
Yeah.
But like this time it was their choice of sacrifice rather than it being forced out of them. Yeah,
and I think it's really interesting how that whole dynamic plays out because it's like, people, they're being used unjustly, and then out of that, to break away from it, they sort of have somewhat selfish inclinations and tendencies, but then they realize in order to really break free from their use, they have to use...
From their slavery.
From their slavery, they have to use their freedom to serve others in some way.
Right.
Which sets everyone free in the end.
Right. It's sacrifice that frees people from slavery. So that's...
In more ways than one. So yeah, I guess...
that's some of the cool stuff, and I think we're beginning to bleed into the truth. This is going to be a short episode.
Yeah, and that's okay. Truth. What are some truths we can get from this movie? Beyond, we sort of started a little bit.
We kind of did start with the sacrifice and the slavery, that whole symbolism there.
Yeah, and it's reflective of like life too. Like, there are probably things in life where bad things happen to you, or someone's used you in some way and other things like that. But if you sort of lash out or act out in ways that are selfish on your part, all you're doing is spreading the selfishness and the hurt around. Whereas if you instead turn it around and redeem that suffering by serving others and creating more good in the world, then you break the cycle,
right? And
everyone's the better for it.
And that's the thing. The under Joe's reign, they had this cycle they were living in. And there was life, there was death, there was birth, there was this whole thing under this cycle that he controlled, and it was not a good cycle. But then it took Furiosa and Max and Nux, their sacrifice and their self-giving to break that cycle.
Yeah, and I think sort of the water symbolizing people's freedom, but also access to grace. If you want to look at it through sort of a religious lens, like if you think about people being enslaved to sin for
for years in the desert,
and then water coming forth from the rock, as it were. But like if you look at water as grace, which is kind of a common symbol, and maybe this was the intention of the writers, who knows, but to sort of at least bring these motifs.
I think in this case, it was more like you control the water, you control the gas, you control the people. Water more represents control and freedom, where Joe hoarded all of the control and freedom.
Yeah.
And when they were driving to the green place, they wanted a place with water and growth that symbolized freedom. It wasn't found there.
Yeah, and they thought they could just go out and find freedom, but then they
had to go fight for it and seize it.
Yeah, and having seized it, then release it for everyone to benefit. Instead, because they could have just become warlords themselves.
They were in a prime position to, but they chose to break the cycle. Right. There's also the subplot about Max's backstory.
Yeah,
where he's tormented by who he lost and who he failed to save. And so in saving other people...
Well, at the beginning of the movie, he's sort of just kind of wandering about the wasteland trying to...
wallowing in his self-pity and trying to... I don't know what he's trying to do. He's just...
trying to run away from it, run away from himself, sort of.
Right. Yeah. And there's a lot of this. That's kind of another theme, running away from things.
Yeah.
But running away from things wasn't the answer.
And running away doesn't give freedom either.
No, they had to run toward
and confront it.
And
the things that were oppressing them in their life.
Right. And with Max, it was his visions of his failures. Mm-hmm. So by going back and confronting his inner demons, mm-hmm. as manifested by the literal outer demons
and
of
Furiosa and the wives, it was going back and confronting their slavery, mm-hmm. to set others free, not just themselves.
And then for Nux, it was going back and confronting his fellow war boys that mm-hmm. that subjugated him and brainwashed him, mm-hmm. and breaking free of that.
Yep.
Through his ultimate sacrifice of blowing up the archway with him underneath it.
Mm-hmm. So
just a lot of really neat themes that are all symbolically tied up in a neat little bow, and it's like,
this movie is way deeper than you would think it is just watching the trailer.
Right, because the trailer is just that piece of classical music.
And there's no great monologues or soliloquies or whatever, but it tells the story very much through
actions speak louder than words. It's a very show don't tell kind of movie, and mm-hmm. I like me some show don't tell.
And this really shows through visuals and audio.
In which case, let's get to beauty.
Yeah.
Oh no, we haven't talked goodness though.
Goodness. Some of the same things apply, but I think the fact that people choose to go back and confront their oppression, their problems and stuff, choose to reject selfishness, mm-hmm. and set others free. Those themes are very good,
right? With
and also the desire, and Max is going from self-preservation to self-sacrifice to protect others, mm-hmm. who are in need.
But same with all of the characters, really. With mm-hmm. Nux is going from self-glorification, mm-hmm. is the purpose of his sacrifices for the war boys, mm-hmm. which he never enacted because he was always caught before he fell off the thing. Mm-hmm. But he turned that into a self-sacrifice for the good of others, mm-hmm. not for his own glory, but for the survival of people he actually liked and cared about.
And I think maybe this slips back and more into the true thing, or whatever. But with Joe, his whole deal, the tighter he held on to power, the more it slipped from his grasp. Mm-hmm. So I guess there's a lesson to be learned there too.
But yeah, the important thing is that all the characters went from very self-interested survivalists, mm-hmm. to people freely and totally and faithfully giving themselves up for others that mm-hmm. bore fruit of freedom.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. And the character of Furiosa is really cool. The character of Max gets really cool. And it's like mm-hmm. they're all really well-written really good performances, very subtle performances, very well-written. Very subtly.
I think Nux is played by the same guy who's Beast in X-Men.
Oh, sure.
And he's been in a few other movies too. But yeah.
That's kind of where the goodness lands, I guess.
Beauty, yeah. Music is pretty wild. The action set pieces are wild. The color.
So fun to look at.
Character design, world design.
You look at the trailers of the movie and it's like, it doesn't even show all the good parts. It's just mm-hmm. like, this is the general vibe. And it's just fun.
And I think another thing that's really impressive about this is how much of it was shot practically.
Right. A lot of the fire, a lot of the driving, a lot of the car explosions.
I think the real only computer editing stuff just came in like putting all the pieces together. Like they filmed everything
right
on location and then stitched it together. And
it's really, really shows. There's a real physicality to the stunts and to the movement and to the whole thing. It's all very believable and but while still being over the top. Mm-hmm. It's very much in the style of like 80s movies where they couldn't do anything but practical effects, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of following up from an 80s series, so I guess that mm-hmm. makes sense.
But it's interesting to see in a modern context.
Right. Because you expect to see flashy CG all over the place, but when it's not there, it's very grounded and gritty, mm-hmm. in like a yeah. I mean, there are, speaking of gritty, there are some like things that are unpleasant. It's like, oh, that's grisly, that's gruesome, mm-hmm. but it's never without a point.
And it's portrayed as grisly and gruesome.
Right.
Like, this is, you're not supposed to,
It doesn't glorify the grisly gruesome. It just treats it as a harsh reality of the world the characters inhabit.
to kind of smack you in the face with it a bit.
That helps the motivations of the characters seem more real when they're like, yeah, we need to break this cycle. We need to get out of here.
But yeah, probably more mature viewing.
Definitely. Well, it's rated R.
Yeah, it is rated R.
So all of you listeners who are under 17,
yeah.
do we have, if my sister actually listens to it.
Yeah, you know who you are.
If you're under 17, thank you for listening.
Yeah. Someday you'll be able to see what we're talking about in some of these cases.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Or you have already, and well, that's your problem.
But before
Unity, what brings everything together in Mad Max?
Takes me a minute to think because I didn't like set down the bullet points. This is very flying by the seat of my pants here.
It's more like how I typically run an episode.
But I feel like you watch the movie, there's a very unified visual design. There's a unified and we talked about back and forth about pretty much the same theme of redemption.
Yeah.
And that's that theme.
And what redemption really entails. Because sometimes redemption is not so much making up for a past wrong, but just sort of making right the wrongs that have been done to you in your life.
Right, because in this scenario, a lot of the wrongs are this society that Joe has built up for himself.
It's sort of an exercise in redemptive suffering for these people.
For the sake of others.
Yeah.
And so that's low-key kind of the tying thing that ties everything together.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it wasn't purposeful to be that this was that Christ-like specifically, but it's like
No,
also...
there wasn't really a specific Christ figure in this. There were a bunch of people who fit
There was a lot of people that were participating in a Christ-like sacrifice.
Yeah.
But like, in terms of a single unifying thing, the theming is very much there. The visuals are there. Even just like most of the movie takes place on cars.
Mm-hmm.
And this theme of travel and running away.
Yeah.
But then they turn around and run toward it again.
Mm-hmm.
I believe even the warrior woman motorcycle ladies help them in the final battle too.
Yep.
Yeah.
They do, yeah. Because they're sort of...
I don't think any
settlements
of
have been destroyed, and they're kind of all older now. But so instead of clinging on to the past, they decide to help make a new future for people. So yeah, good, cool stuff. We managed to get. I mean, my computer notwithstanding, we managed to get through a duo episode.
Is this our first duo episode?
Pretty sure.
Is this? Because there was one time I left, and that the first. I think that's the only one I missed. That's when you had John.
Yeah. So
for Avatar.
Yeah. So we always had 3 at least. So
but there never was a time that Riley wasn't here. That it was just us.
Yeah.
There's sometimes it felt like that, and sometimes it felt like it was just you and Riley, or just me and Riley because of the topic.
Mm-hmm. Well, we keep soldiering on. Yeah. I guess on that note, thanks for listening to the Palladium Papists. You can listen to us on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Papists. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints, or suggestions for future episodes, email us at palladiumpapists@gmail.com. So yeah, hopefully next week we'll have Riley back.
Or at least John available.
Yeah.
Because Riley should be back from where he is doing his life thing.
Yeah.
And he'll be stationed at his place where he'll be seminarying.
So yeah, it might be good back to some remote episodes. But yeah, we'll get Riley back on the pod, and then we'll be bringing you more content next week.
Yeah.
So, bye.
Bye.